According to this study right here, Christianity could be gone in 50 years. And that has to do with Baal, Asherah, ancient pagan gods that we haven't heard about in a long time. So let's talk about them. Welcome to The Snipe Life, where we look at creativity through the lens of Christianity, and this is a series that we call Christian Misconceptions. Last time we talked about angels, how you could have met one, and what the purpose for angels are. If you haven't seen that video, check it out right here. But today we're going to be talking about the decline of Christianity in the United States, and why this is happening overall, or at least why I think so. But before we talk about today in the United States, we have to go back thousands of years to talk about the ancient idols of Israel, and discuss what we see in scripture and also what that means for us today. So as created beings, we are hardwired to seek out and worship a creator. We want nothing more than to glorify and build up the being who created us in the first place. But throughout all of time, humans have always come up with their own ideas of what this creator could be instead of the true idea of who the creator is. So we begin to see idols popping up like Baal or Asherah, who are symbols of fertility and prosperity. And the people would go to them in order to have a child or for their crops to be a better yield that year. But it even got as bad as child sacrifice, with an idol named Molech. And this became a large part of these pagan cultures over time, where many, many children were sacrificed. And so these people began to try to find answers outside of Yahweh, in their own way, in their own idols. And so if you couldn't get pregnant, you would pray here. If you had low finances, you would pray here. If your crop was a bad yield that year, you would pray here. Even in the beginning of the Israelite nation, we see as Moses goes up on the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments. And as he comes back down, literally glowing from the presence of God, what does he see? He sees as Aaron and the rest of the Israelites have already started to worship other idols while he's been gone. It's insane, right? How quickly we can turn away from God and turn to our own things. When we think about this subject, we often think of mythology. We think of the Greeks like Hercules and Zeus. We think of the Norse mythology like Thor and Loki. We think of all the things that the ancient Israelites did with these ancient idols, right? But all of this is a symptom of the same problem, at least in my mind, right? And that is humanity, humanity's pride, humanity's desire to reach out to something higher than themselves. And so we often get stuck in these things. And we separate ourselves from that, right? So many times we separate ourselves from these ancient gods and goddesses. But the truth is that today we probably worship way more than the Israelites did back then. And it's way more obvious today as well. We just have to look. So today I'm going to talk about 5 specific things that the United States is struggling hard with when it comes to idols. And it's bringing us this, the decline of Christianity in the United States. Now, the first one, which I think we can base most all of these other ones off of, is selfishness. In the United States, we are force-fed this idea of individuality, that everything we own is ours, that we have to put ourselves first, and that we need to build ourselves up into the person that we think that we should be. And so this culture of selfishness begins to permeate everything. So whether it's something like your career or even a relationship that you're in, everything becomes very self-centered. It's all about you, how you can gain from it, and what you're getting out of this other person or career or thing. And this becomes an idol in our lives so easily because God has asked us to do the exact opposite of this. He's asked us to be a community together, not to be an individualized, selfish person, but to grow together as a church, to give what's needed, even if it were to take away a little bit from you, and to help others, even when it's inconvenient for you. So this selfish attitude begins to become a huge problem within the United States because we're told on one hand, you need to look out for yourself, you need to build your own business, you need to be your own person. But then on the other hand, God is asking you to take care of the poor and the needy. So how do you reconcile those two things? Well, it's really hard. And most of the time you don't. You end up being selfish and you end up perpetuating that idea that the United States is filled with today. It becomes our idol. Here's a great example that applies to this YouTube channel right here. In every single video, I ask you guys to like and subscribe. And yet many of you don't. Why? Because, well, selfishly, you don't really want to press the button. Selfishly, you don't really have the time to do that or the energy. And that's okay, you don't have to, but I would really like you to like this video. It would help us out a lot. And for us, what would that mean? It would mean that we could grow on YouTube. We could spread God's message even further. But for you, it ends up being a selfish moment, right? And I know this because I do it all the time. I don't like every video that I watch. I don't subscribe to every channel that I actually like. It's just something that I don't do on a regular basis. So I understand where you're coming from. But if the church were to act like it should in a non-selfish way, then all of these Christian creators that are trying to build up and to spread the gospel of God would be bigger than any of the other channels on YouTube, right? They would be stronger and spread the message, spread the gospel further than anyone ever could. But because we can't work together, because we're so selfish in our thinking and what we want, we often don't think of the outcome of what we could be a part of in the grand scheme of things. Next, let's talk about a hot button issue, and that is sex. Sex has become a massive, massive issue in the United States, from billboards now to TikTok. There's all of these things that are pushing people towards sex, making it this idol that everybody is interested in. I remember from a very young age, all of my friends in middle school and high school, they knew about sex. They wanted to have sex, and many of them were having sex. And so for me, it was a real struggle as a Christian to understand what I was supposed to be doing in that sphere. They became engulfed in this thought that sex was the pinnacle of everything that they wanted in life, everything that they needed in life. And it became a goal for everyone that I was around. Now, don't hear me wrong. Sex is not a bad thing. Sex is great, and it's amazing as long as it's within the bounds of what God has created. But so many people misuse, pervert, and distort what God has created here, and it becomes a real issue and a real idol in a lot of people's lives, to the point where this is the thing that they live for. This is the thing that they mark their whole lives around, right? And it becomes the center point instead of God. As you know very well, this has become one of the major idols in today's world, and it stems from the Baals and the Asherahs. It comes from that culture that has permeated all of time, and this has become such a huge issue that I can't even watch a TV show. I can't even watch a kid's show without seeing relationships and sex and scandals. It's prevalent everywhere, and there's no way that you can escape it unless you have severe boundaries up. And going even further, the more important, dangerous part of this is the online accessibility to sex overall nowadays. It's so easy for an elementary school kid, a middle school kid, or a high school kid to access sex at any time for any reason. And there's no guards, there's no boundaries, there's nothing that would stop them from doing so if they wanted to. And there's TikTok, there's other social media platforms that are pushing this onto children at a very young age. This has become such a problem that I would say about 99% of the men that I've spoken to deal with this issue. And nowadays, even 60 to 75% of the women that I've had this conversation with deal with the same things. And this rolls into the next idol that I want to talk about, and that is pleasure. In America and in the world in general, we are told that if it feels good, do it. And that's just not true. The scriptures are very clear about how we're to interact with pleasures, right? Don't let the pleasures of this world overtake you, because you may gain the world, but you will lose your soul. And it's an understanding that God is better than all of these things that make you feel good in the moment, and that you shouldn't allow this one thing to keep you from being with God. So I'm talking about the things like sex, like drugs, like alcohol that keep you from being with God, but even the smaller things, maybe like food. Have you thought about that? Can food be an idol in your life because of the pleasure that it gives you by eating it? That double chocolate brownie that is just amazing, right? But that can be an idol for you in your life if that's what you live for, if that's what you wake up thinking about, if that's what you want every single day instead of God, then that can become an idol in your life. The goal should not be to receive pleasure for anything that you do, but to glorify God in everything that you do. Fourth on this list is money. Money becomes a huge issue for many of us, especially in the United States, but all across the world. We deal with this issue because, well, we need money to survive, right? I need money to buy groceries and to pay my electric bill and to have my car run so that I can get to church and to buy gas, even if it is $17 million a gallon. Here's the question that I would ask in order to see if money is an idol in your life. What does success look like to you? Think about this for a second, because this is going to help me to understand the posture of your heart whenever you answer this question. It'll give me an insight into what you care about most, what your desires are, and what your priorities are. Because if you say that success looks like having lots of money and being able to provide for your family and do whatever you want, then that's one point, right? But then on the other side, if you're a Christian and you say that my version of success is to do whatever God has asked me to do to glorify him no matter the outcome, then that's a different posture of your heart, right? Not necessarily that the first one is bad, but that could lead to an idolatry of money, because it's all about what your North Star is in your life. Is your final destination to have $1 million in the bank and be set that way? Or is it to glorify God no matter the outcome? Because the difference there is huge, because God could lead you to $1 million in your bank, and he has done with several Christians over time. Look at Dave Ramsey. He's got hundreds of millions of dollars, but he's doing God's work across the planet, helping people get out of debt and sharing the gospel along the way. But if your goal is just that money, then you have a severe different outcome, because what happens when you get that money? We see it over and over and over again. Look at this clip.
I don't know what to do with, I've got more money than I could possibly use. When you're working on paying off a house, that's a motivator.
Yep.
Everything's gone, right? So now, writing checks for charity, it doesn't always satisfy me. It's just a check. I don't see the end result.
Mm-hmm.
Leaving a ton of money to my kids doesn't feel satisfying. I feel like that just puts them in the same problem I'm facing right now.
Mm-hmm.
We don't spend a ton. It doesn't satisfy me to spend. So
That's just
I find
awesome.
I struggle when I get
so
a bonus
you have
at work,
discovered that money is not the answer to happiness.
Money brings ease. It doesn't bring happiness or fulfillment. So the more money that you have, the easier it is to do things and to have things. But nothing else changes. Your emotions don't change. Your state of being doesn't change. The fact that you're a child of God doesn't change. So all of that is just amplified with money. And yet so many of us still strive to have as much money as we possibly can, because there's always that next thing and that next thing and that next thing. And yet they're not fulfilled by money, even when we get that thing. All that happens is that we lose out on our identity with God, which brings me to my very last idol, which is identity. Over the last 10 to 20 years, identity has become the biggest subject among young people. As we can see today, we're dealing with this leaps and bounds above what we did 10, 20, 30 years ago. So many people are confused about pronouns and genders and what is going on. God created us male and female, and yet the identity of people is being questioned all the time. This is a new thing, right? Well, not exactly. For me, I think this is the oldest trick in the book from Satan. The very first thing that Satan does in the Bible is he asks Eve, did God really say? He didn't force Eve to eat the fruit. He didn't even say, oh, here's this fruit, looks good, you should try it. He said, did God really say? And that was the beginning of the conversation that led Eve to the fall, led Adam to the fall, led humanity to the fall. It was a question of identity. It was a question of trust. And so today we're seeing the echoes of that over and over and over again. Did God really say that you should have one wife? Did God really say that you're a male? Did God really say that you're a female? Did God really say that you're a human? I truly believe that that's what we're going to see in the future. We're already starting to see the beginnings of it. People pretending that they're ponies or horses or wolves. All of these things are an identity crisis that people are having. They don't know who they are because they don't know whose they are. How do we interact with those that are blatantly disregarding God's identity that he's given them and turning it into something else? It's become an idol for all of them, because it's not just a transition, right? It's not just a transition from one gender to another. What it truly is a rejection of what God has for you, and then an idolatry of your ideology. It's your own thoughts that are built up to be the God in your life. And it does become that. We see that everywhere today. And I use these examples because they're the most prominent that we think of today. But this can go any way. If you're a cook and you decide that your identity as a cook is more important than your identity in Christ, then that becomes a big issue. If you're a pastor and your identity as a pastor becomes more important than your identity in Christ, then that's a big issue. Literally anything that we put in front of God, put above God, put greater than God, becomes an idol in our lives. So beware the idols in your life, just as the 8-year-old King Josiah did as he eradicated all of the idols in Israel. If you want to see more about that video, make sure to check it out right here. And other than that, I hope you like this video. Thanks for being part of our community, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.